Good morning and welcome. Today we are going to talk about my proposal for thesis project. This is titled Generative Adversarial Network GANs to generate new samples for WSI image segmentation using neural networks. Representing is Luis José Mantilla Santa Cruz. Well, we are going to start with the introduction. This thesis project investigates basically GANs as a way to generate synthetic data in order to fix data sets and improve the results achieved by neural network trained with these data sets on segmentation tasks, basically. Okay, so the introduction. Medical image analysis is actually living a revolution during the continuous improvement of architecture of artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence techniques. And basically, the artificial intelligence is leading a revolution and it is making a revolution in every single field. So one of the most ambitious applications are the computer eye diagnosis or CAD systems, which is basically focused on medical diagnosis. And the principal objective is reducing the time required for cancer disease. In this case, cancer disease by in general, the objective is reduce the time required for a prediction, basically. But in this, we have for some example of applications of CAT, for example, to detect breast cancer, liver cancer, pancreas cancer, brain cancer, skin cancer, and others. Well, associated with this methodology, we have some data sources. Here we have the abbreviation and the full name sources. So for example, CT means computerized tomography, PET, positron emission tomography, RNA, basically RNA sequence, MG mammography, US ultrasound images, AHR, electronic health records, MRI, magnetic resonance images, AUS, endoscopy ultrasound, DTA, diffusion tensor imaging, fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and EJ, dermoscopy. Well, this is a table that summarizes some data sources. Well, these data sources are associated to determined diseases. So, for example, we have some sources associated with lung cancer, some others associated with breast cancer, liver cancer, pancreas cancer, and brain cancer. In this case, we are going to focus on breast cancer because we would like to work with WSI images. The methodology presents 5 steps. The first one is raw data, is basically collect raw data. The second one is data preprocessing, and basically we have many operations that we can do in this step. The third one is region of interest extraction, basically identify regions. The third one is feature extraction, basically get some parts of the sources to be considered important. And finally, the classification. Well, in the second step, we have data preprocessing. As I say, We have some tasks that we can realize when I was doing preprocessing of data. For example, we can do real precise images, noise removal, data augmentation, normalization. Particularly, we are interested in data augmentation techniques. We have two approaches. The first one, traditional approaches methods, and the second one is GAN methods. Well, the global objective of CAT methodology is to get a identification of region. Well, in here we can see we have in the left side WSI images. In the center we have a neural network architecture, and in the right side we have a prediction. Basically, this is what we want to achieve in CAD systems. Ah, subject and hypothesis. The subject is the use of generative adversarial networks to generate new samples that increase the contained characteristic into the dataset. Well, we basically wants to uh, wants to get a good dataset with enough characteristic to get better patterns into the neural network architecture. Yeah. So my hypothesis, the first hypothesis is it's possible to establish a statistical measure between synthetic images in order to identify which ones has more or less characteristics. The second one hypothesis is we can improve the dataset quality by adding synthetic samples. And the third one is the integrate synthetic images into a dataset can improve the obtained result achieved by a neural network. The first objective is develop a methodology that allows us generating new samples and evaluate the samples using a new neural networks in order to improve the dataset quality for WSI image segmentation. Basically, we want to develop a methodology that allows evaluate new samples to fix some datasets. Well, the specific objectives. First, study the GAN's neural networks. The second one is identify the the databases that allow us to build training and testing dataset. The first step is propose a methodology that allows evaluating synthetic data generated by GANs in order to improve the dataset quality. The third one is train and test regular neural network architecture focused on image segmentation such as UNet. And the fifth one is evaluate the results. But the state of the art. But I mentioned there are global objective to get it is to get a CAD application, CAD system, and some of articles mention 5 steps that we need to develop for CAD systems. These articles, well, there are here we have 3 articles that mention these steps. Tariq Nam and team presented the CAD generalized architecture. Well, but we are going to focus on the techniques for data augmentation. Actually, we have 2 perspectives, as I told you. The first involved basic operations such as flipping, cropping, rotation, translation, alteration of the brightness, color transformations, transformation, even using kernel filters, random erasing, radial transformation, color casting, and others. Some example of these traditional techniques applications are, for example, the paper presented by Vallis. He presents a new technique which generate new realistic samples using two and combining them into one. Well, the article presented by Zach present a hybrid propose of combination of regular data augmentation and pix-to-pix architecture to improve basically classification results. However, this architecture just try to increase the data increase, but this paper just use data augmentation regular techniques, and it could not be considered as a GAN technique. Srindy proposed a self-supervised architecture. Well, Srindy basically proposed an architecture based in two structure. The first one is the teacher, the second one is the student. The teacher was trained with data augmented with traditional techniques, and this architecture teach the student how to segment an image. Well, the augmentation applied for this paper are, for example, rotation, horizontal flipping, scaling, additive Gaussian noises, brightness, and constant perturbations, and others. Well, Allender generate an spatial deformed image. Well, basically, he deformed the space and take the image, mix with this transformed space, and finally get some interesting new samples. But he doesn't add new characteristics. But the data augmentation techniques based on GANs, we have some of them. More recently, papers present many interesting architectures. By example, SAC present a review of data augmentation methods based on generative adversarial network GANs. He focused on the structures, the data requirements, and others. Caras present an adaptive discriminator mechanism, basically to avoid a problem that exists when we generate some samples. For example, we can generate many samples, but that sample could not be significant or has a characteristic that can be labeled as an unrealistic characteristic. So he tried to solve it. Wu present a framework for classification that consists in three parts. The first is classification focus on multiple instance learning. The second step is the generation of synthetic data using GANs. And finally, retrain the structure using the data generated. Well, in McCarthy present a GAN model to generate synthetic samples of malignant urine or urology. However, this paper present some of the common problems that we can have to know when we will generate new samples, because this sample could be consistent with the methodology of generation. However, it could be improbable in real life, and that kind of problems are discussed by McCarthy. Well, main actors. Well, we have the main conferences. Some of them are in Singapore, San Diego, and some of them are online or in USA, many of them, or in England. Well, some of the most important are medical image computing and computer assisted intervention, International Symposium on Biomedical Image, LSPIA, Medical Imaging, International Conference on Big Data, Machine Learning in Medical Imaging, Symposiums on Applying Computing, International Conference on Software Testing, Verification and Validation, the American Medical Informatics Association Annual Symposium, the International Conference on Bioinformatics and Biomedicine, International Conference on Healthcare Informatics, the Parallel Problem Solving for Nature, the International Conference on System, Man, and Cybernetics and Information Processing in Medical Imaging. We have the location and the impact score of each conference. But the main actors, we have a small list of the most important actors or authors for medical image analysis. And they are working with artificial intelligence. And we can see that many of them have present many articles that are really, really interesting and really cited by the community. For example, Dan Claudio Cicera and Babak Shami, Behnor Nordi, Nicholas Coudray, and others. Well, this list tries to summarize some of the most important researchers in this field. So the main researchers groups. We have one interesting group, MIG which is located in Campinas, São Paulo. And we have the Biomedical Image Group in Switzerland, the Computer Vision and Image Group in UK, Scotland, the Imaging Science in Manchester, UK. Principal concepts. As a principal concept, we have WSI images. Well, basically, it is an histopathology whole slide image scanning. Well, it's generated by a scanner which is usually calibrated with a color. And some of the paper authors is told us the possibility of generate many images using a single scanner and just do a variation in a calibration color. So what this means is we can have many different images of the same tissue, just changing the calibration color value. Basically, this is a problem because the images could be the same image but has differences. Well, in this image we have a small a small representation of a WSI image. Well, the second interesting concept is the generative adversarial network GAN, which is a framework that we can say that it's a set of two architectures, the generator and discriminator. The generator creates new samples and the discriminator evaluate them. They use a probability space. Basically, the generator generate elements in that probability space, and the discriminator use these generated elements to measure it. And finally, we should to optimize the objective function, which is in equation 1. Evaluation metrics. This is small building blocks that we will use to measure the results basically. Well, we have the true positives, false positive, true negative, false negative. Well, these small blocks we can use to calculate some more interesting measures or metrics such as sensitivity, specificity, or precision, accuracy, error rate, recall. Well, however, this is not the end because we have more interesting measures, such as F measures. The F measure use the previous equations to calculate more accurate measure for our results. Basically, F measure represent the harmonic weight of precision and recall. In additional, we can use specificity, sensitivity, Jacob index, dice coefficient, and others to measure the results. And we are planning to use Rockure to analyze what's happening with the results under certain constant, certain restrictions. So the rock curve is performed by the calculation of true positive rate and false positive rate. We have the equations and we just plot these calculations into a single 2D space. The methodology. As a methodology, we will use CAT architecture for breast cancer detection. We have many authors that describe the CAT architecture, and we studied the first slides. Well, we propose the next steps. The first, the selection of data sets and collect the raw data. The second one, data preprocessing, normalization from selected data set, their region of interest extraction, feature extraction, train and test, and validate models for WSI image segmentation, and finally, analyze and validation of the results. We need to say that we have many databases. However, we will focus on breast cancer, and we have here in this table some resources associated with breast cancer and its linked to download. Well, preprocessing data. This is the most important part. We will use GANs to generate synthetic data. To achieve this aim, we propose the next steps. First, select training and test sets for GAN networks, generate synthetic elements, evaluate and select generated samples, and integrate some selected samples into the dataset for training. Test, train, test, and validate models. Well, the model for WSI image segmentation, well, basically we using GANs to generate new samples, and we are going to use a simple or common neural network for segmentation. But the most interesting part is the generation of this data, the generation and evaluation of this data. Well, the analysis and validation of the result, we are planning to use the dissimilarity coefficient in matrix of F1, and additionally we are planning to use cross validation to calculate the precision achieved by the models. Here we have the dice coefficient. Basically, we have to calculate this coefficient to evaluate the results. But expected results. It's expected to develop a methodology that allowed us to evaluate and include synthetic samples into the dataset in order to improve the precision reached by a neural network to segment WSA images. It means it's expected that a neural network learn to generate results similar to the provided by a qualified specialist. Limitations. The first limitation is the understanding. I need to get a better understanding of how GAN's neural network works and how we can generate appropriate data using these neural networks. Identify the methodology that allows generation of consistent data to improve dataset quality. This is another limitation because there is less papers. There are not too much papers related with this subject. And the final limitation is develop an environment that enables the development of large neural network models, basically to train and test in these models. But finally, my bibliography, and that's all. Thank you.